Okay, so hello everybody, welcome. I know a lot of people are doing countdown here, 3 minutes, 10 seconds to go, and finally we are here. One. So, welcome everybody on this impromptu show which just happened. We said, why waste time and let's share some great thought leaders with you, their ideas about the world. And I was speaking uh, to Mr. Anupam Kher, and he was generally talking to me. I said, let's have a chat. So I said, Kher Saab, everybody is talking about depressing thing, death. Why don't we celebrate life? Because that's the best gift we have. And he said, let's do it. And then I said, why only Mr. Kher? Let's get different thought leaders and share their ideas because a lot of people have been asking me. So I started the Future of Life Festival and I called it festival. I was sure that trolls are going to come after me, but nobody did. I deliberately used the word festival because I think as long as we have life, it's a festive thing, it's a celebratory thing because we get only one life and you have to be really, really lucky to get that life. So welcome, Ashwin.
Thank you, Vivek. I'm so delighted to be here and thank you for inviting me. In times like this, the mere fact that I'm getting a chance to talk to you, nowadays we are craving for human interaction. So thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, so let me tell you, even I didn't know. Yes, in fact, the first time I heard about you, I mean, I read your name when I saw in those that time I was very in, even now I'm very much into management and stuff like that, and I was always fascinated with one of the greatest political minds of our times and management minds. So I saw a book called Chanakya's Chan, so I picked that up, and when you are not very interested in authors and sometimes just the title and I started reading it, that's a book lying with me, old copy also with me.
Hmm,
Then I was sent a new copy by somebody else,
hmm,
and I marked lots of things, picked up the quotes, but
hmm,
whole lot of people here, Hemant is saying Jai Chanakya. So Allah, Ayush Mishra has written, Ashwin sir just finished your Vault of Vishnu, and I must say it was damn good. I literally got goosebumps just like I got in Krishna Ki. So you have some very dedicated
Thank
readers
you.
here, and
Thank you.
I must apologize here. I picked up, started, I read 10, 15 pages of Vishnu, and then I was in the lockdown, and it's
Ah,
lying in my office because I take all my books there. So
Bilkul.
it's my own library, so I have to read it. I'm not allowed to go to my office because we are in containment zone, so we
Oh,
just
wow.
can't step out at all. Yeah. So
Oh, God.
anyway, welcome, Ashwin. You are really, really so famous you can't even imagine. Okay,
Nahi.
sometimes what happens is that some people are always like me, always some kind of mischief, but there are lots of people who are
That's the understatement of the year.
there was a very wonderful thing somebody told me. A very good friend of mine in Hollywood. He's a 52 times Grammy Award winner, a old Philharmonic conductor.
Hmm,
In fact,
hmm,
he started with Phantom of Opera, Mr. Jose
hmm.
Cerebrier. So he had
Oh,
told me a very interesting thing. I
hmm.
asked him to do background music in one of my films,
ठीक है.
and so I was saying, let's get more dramatic and typical Bollywood. At that time, I was Bollywood. So typical Bollywood filmmakers like loud, more music because they think story has no dum, so music should hold it. So he told me a very interesting thing. He said, "Ki if you can do with one flute, why call the entire orchestra?"
बिल्कुल.
तो
Very
आपके साथ ये है, हम लोग जो है ऑर्केस्ट्रा वाले लोग हैं, बहुत शोर मचाते हैं अपनी कहानी के साथ. You have been quietly writing, and people who do not know, though everybody here sounds as if they have read most of 2233. Somebody saying, "Sir, loved your Krishna Ki," and somebody saying, "Lot of Ayush is saying, lot of respect for you." Pratik Mokal is saying, "Keepers of the Kal Chakra." That's your book.
yes it.
Oh shit, so sad. I'm sorry. मेरे को पता भी नहीं था,
Oh,
पर मैं नाम काल चक्रा देख के समझ गया था. So you have been quietly writing so many books. If people who don't know, Ashwin has written 13 books, 13 kitaben, right? 13 books you have written. And you have written a series of 13 tips also, or 13
hmm,
good things about
hmm,
health, wealth, and all those
hmm,
things. So ये
hmm.
13 number का क्या role है? What is it?
So, so since we are today talking about stories and storytelling, let me start with my own story, Vivek.
Okay, I
And
would love to know that.
that will explain the 13 factor in it. क्या हुआ कि honestly speaking, my entire life was not meant to be the life of a writer. I am a product of a half Marwadi, half Banya family. My father is a Marwadi, my mother is a Banya. In other words, this is a deadly combination. एंड यू नो कई घरों में जब बच्चे पैदा होते हैं तो कहीं कोई उच्चारण होता है, कोई जाप होता है, कोई कोई माला फेरता है. पर मारवाड़ी फैमिलियों में, मारवाड़ी परिवारों में, द टू मैजिक वर्ड्स आर डेबिट एंड क्रेडिट. यू नो दे आर विस्पर्ड इनटू द चाइल्ड्स ईयर्स. डेबिट, क्रेडिट. तुम अपना गणित समझ लो, सब कुछ सब समझ लिए. So, with that sort of an environment, my entire upbringing was oriented towards that. And of course, everything had to happen at the right time. So, you know, I was expected to sort of go to the right school, go to the right college, get an MBA degree at the right age, marry the right girl, have the right number of kids by the right age. All of that happened. But somewhere or the other, what was going on in my life was that मैं 12 साल की उम्र से धंधे में लग गया. I was, you know, working alongside my father from age 12.
Profession? What exact role you were playing? What were you doing?
So in those days, of course, my job used to be part-time, but I was always very good in accounting. I mean, you know, there was a Marwadi Munimji in our office. He used to wear a topi, a dhoti, kurta. And I was very fond of reading. He would see books in my hand and he would say, stop wasting your time with book reading. Instead, focus on bookkeeping and don't waste your time on reading books. Instead, read a balance sheet. That will at least get you somewhere in life. So the parallel influence in my life, Vivek, was my Nana ji. मेरे नाना जी कानपुर में रहते थे.
अरे मैं कानपुर का हूं, आपको पता है? आई एम फ्रॉम कानपुर.
अरे वाह, देखिए, now this is called 1 degree of separation. 1 degree of separation. So Nana ji had this habit of sending me a book every week to read. And he not only wanted the book to reach me and for me to read it, but within about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I was expected to write a letter to him saying what I had read, whether I liked it, didn't like it, what were my thoughts about what had been written. And this tug of war between the Banya part of me and this literacy side of me, the literate side of me, carried on. So I went one day to Nana ji and I said, Nana ji, ये जो मुनीम जी हैं, ये मुझे कहते रहते हैं कि ये पढ़ाई लिखाई छोड़ दो and just focus on business. So he then told me a story. And I'm purposely using the word story because this was critical in my life. He said कि बेटा देखो, तुम तो बनिया मारवाड़ी फैमिली से हो, तो तुम तो लक्ष्मी जी की पूजा करोगे ही करोगे. It is part of your upbringing. It is in your DNA that you have to worship Lakshmi. He said, but remember one thing, there is a very unique relationship between Lakshmi and Saraswati. He said, wherever Saraswati is, Lakshmi wants to be there. He said, if Saraswati is in this room right now, then Lakshmi ji also wants to come here. और अगर अभी सरस्वती जी उठ के चले गई तो लक्ष्मी कहती है कि मैं भी जरा देखूं वो कहां गई है, वो क्या कर रही है. So she is curious. So he said, even if your objective in life is to go after money, he said the easiest way of ensuring that is to go after Saraswati ji, because Lakshmi ji खुद ब खुद वहां पर पहुंच जाएंगी. And he said, एक चीज याद रखो कि हमारे जो हिंदू लाइनअप है गॉड्स गॉडेसेस की, तो अगर लक्ष्मी जी और सरस्वती के बीच में कोई भी ऐसा एक जन है जो उनके बीच में बैठ सकता है, वो है गणेश. So he said, live your life as if you want to live like Ganesh. Keep Saraswati on one side, keep Lakshmi on one side. And I like to joke, Vivek, that probably that's the reason for my physical characteristics, because I've become somewhat of a Ganesh. So this used to carry on, and I never thought about becoming a writer. It didn't even cross my mind till the time that almost 15 years after I had completed my MBA, got into work fully, and suddenly I went to Kashmir, and that is another story which we will talk about on this session. But the result of that was that I ended up writing a book. And once I had written that manuscript, I ended up getting rejected by 47 publishers and literary agents. 47. And that is the ones who replied back. Many of them did not even bother to reply. So finally, out of sheer desperation, in 2007, I had decided that अब बहुत हो गया, मैं अब गिव अप कर जाऊंगा. और हमारे फैमिली में मेरे फादर के एक पंजाबी दोस्त थे, वो आते थे फ्राइडे सैटरडे को in order to have a drink with my father. They used to pour themselves very nice large patiala pegs and used to have a good time on Friday or Saturday. And this gentleman looked at me and he said, "Beta, what is the matter? तुम बड़े depressed लग रहे हो." And I said, "Uncle ji, मैं क्या करूं? 47 literary agents and publishers have already rejected me." He said, "But beta, कुछ और को अप्लाई कर दो, क्या फर्क पड़ता है?" I said, "But कोई मेरे लिस्ट पे बाकी नहीं है, सबको जिनको भी अप्लाई करना था सबको अप्लाई कर चुका हूं." तो he then picked up his glass, which had about 3 fingers of whiskey in it. He picked up his glass and he said, "Remember one thing, beta. In life, 99% is about good luck." So I was in an argumentative mood. I asked him, I said, "But Uncle Ji, then what is the 1%? 1% must be hard work, efficiency, management, networking, resources. There must be so many things." He said, "That 1%," and before he answered it, he gulped down the whiskey. He said, "That 1% is known as bloody good luck. 99% is luck. 1% is bloody good luck." And I thought to myself, I said, one day I will write a book about luck and bloody good luck. And that resulted in a book 10 years later known as 13 Steps to Bloody Good Luck.
Yeah.
So that is how this, and at the time I wrote this book, of course, I didn't know that I was going to be eventually making it into a series. So because it was dealing with the concept of luck, and 13 somehow gets a very bad reputation when it comes to matters of luck. It starts actually with the code of Hammurabi, where the 13th law was the death sentence. Then it went on to Jesus Christ and the Last Supper, where there were 13 people at the Last Supper table. And somehow or the other, after Friday the 13th happened, 13 gets a bad rap. So I thought that if I have to come up with the title, then let me call it 13 Steps to Bloody Good Luck. That is the connection to 13.
Brilliant. I mean, it's such a wonderful this thing. And if you look at more and more storytellers I speak to, and they always narrate, more or less, they narrate about some incident from their childhood. And in that incident, I've seen Dada, ya Dadi, ya Nana, ya Nani, somebody is always involved. You know, I had, in fact, my Mausi, who was like my grandmother, she was very old in Kanpur. So, and as a child, I was very fascinated because she used to tell me lots of complex stories very simply, you know, and I was fascinated, and I really was in awe of her because I thought she's introducing me to the world which I didn't know. Though everybody in my family was in a way or the other was connected with education. And one day I said, what will you become when you grow up? So I said, I will become a writer, because she used to tell me all the stories. So she said, राइटर पागल हो गए हो क्या, राइटर बनोगे? मैंने कहा हाँ, मैं राइटर बनूंगा. तो कहती है उसके लिए क्वालिटी चाहिए. मैंने कहा क्या? तो शी सेड, सारी जिंदगी अकेले रह सकते हो? मैंने, व्हाट डू यू मीन? एंड शी told me one thing. She said, chances might be that nobody is interested in listening to your story. Will you be able to tell your story then? And I don't know what impact it had in my mind. I don't know. But somehow I concluded in my mind that your story should connect with people.
Bilkul.
And it's very important. And stories connect when there is some kind of life is attached to it. Any story or character which is not close to life, anybody's life, it has to have life. That's what I realized. And same thing happened with me also when urban access. Hari Kiran said, Vivek, you have gone through so much of resistance in India. Generally, people don't catalog and write stories about their resistance and the kind of opposition they get. Why don't you write your experience?
Bilkul.
And when I wrote it, so I remembered my Nani, and I said, okay, if my Nani has to read this book, will she understand it or not? Because my image is that she did not understand complex language and stuff like that. I wrote it very simply. So a lot of people, in fact, all the up to utne 47 pata nahi publishers हैं भी कि नहीं. There are about 6 7 big publishers. So Hari and I, we sent it to everybody, and most of them said, um, we like Vivek's films better than this because this is not something which is has got literary value. Then
Hmm.
finally we said, okay, let's publish it ourselves, and rest is history. It became like one of the
Yeah,
phenomenal books.
absolutely.
So what
And
I
in
want,
fact, I must tell you, I enjoyed reading that book. I personally, Vivek, I have always felt that you are a great storyteller. And I think the testament to that comes through the Tashkent files. I mean, you know, for a long, long time, Bollywood did not understand that the story has to be the hero. We've always had heroes and heroines, and we've had, as you rightly said, we've had, the masala, and we've had the orchestras and the music and all of that, but we never considered a script to be a hero. But on the other hand, now when I'm looking at movies like, for example, Tashkent Files, I mean, what happened when I was, as it so happens, I had just finished reading the Mitrokin archives, just about maybe the Mitrokin Files, probably around a couple of months before this movie came out, maybe 3 4 months before. And then I ended up going and watching it. And at that point of time, no one in my family was really sort of aware of this subject. So they weren't that interested in going and seeing it. So I took a half day off from my office. And near Worldly only in Atria Mall, I went and saw it on my own. I came back that evening and I told my wife, I said, Anu, ये पिक्चर जो है मुझे इसकी स्टोरी बड़ी पसंद आई एंड इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट सब्जेक्ट्स विच आर वेरी क्लोज टू माई हार्ट. So she said कि अच्छा, maybe I should have come with you. I said, एक काम करते हैं, I'll see it again with you. So we went the next day and we saw the movie the second time. Then my wife couldn't stop gushing about it. She said it's a fantastic film. And she told my parents. And so a week later, I found myself going for a third time with my wife and my parents to see that same film. Now, and let me tell you, I wasn't bored even watching it the third time. And that's what I mean when you make the story the hero. That just the narrative itself is enough to keep you involved. You know, it was the great director Alfred Hitchcock. He said that the length of a movie is related to the endurance of the human bladder. You can
yeah.
only sit there till such time as your bladder doesn't give way. So, whereas this was a movie that I was willing to see 3 times. So, really congratulations to you, because it was obviously done with limited resources, but the story was so bloody gripping, and that's what we all want to do as storytellers: tell a gripping story.
Thanks a lot, Ashwin, for that. Really, I'm humbled. But I think how we made both Buddha in a traffic jam and Taj Mahal, there's a story behind story how we made it. That's another story. But okay, so you know, lo- stories. I mean, what is life without stories? Everything we know, even the concept of democracy or liberty or justice, equality, everything in this world is a story.
Of
And
course.
I believe there is one very big, large, at some point of time, at a different point, one large story is going on. And what
Yes.
authors like you do is you sense it, you perceive it instinctively, or I don't know how, but you pick up one part of that story and you start telling it. If you want
Yes.
to understand the larger story, you have to pick up lots of stories and put them together, and then you understand it.
बिल्कुल.
But
बिल्कुल.
right now, what has happened for the first time in the history of humanity,
Yes.
that the entire world, there is nobody in this world who's not thinking exactly about the same thing, and that too locked up absolutely. So, if as an author, as a writer, if you have to tell this story so that 50 years from now, 70 years from now, if somebody picks up this short story of yours, what is that story going to be? Can you just tell a lot of people? Because yesterday when I said that I'm going to be talking to you, this idea came. Some people wrote to me and said, please ask him how he looks at this corona pandemic. So I said, I want to ask you, I'm not a doctor, I'll ask you how you look at the story side of it. Can you quickly tell us something?
Vivek, I have always been called a conspiracy fiction writer. And because I'm always curious about the story behind the story.
Hmm,
For example, when I went first time to visit the Rosabal Shrine in Srinagar, and someone told me that यार यहाँ पर हो सकता है कि ये जो मकबरा है ये 2000 साल से यहाँ पर है और इसमें ईसा मसीह की का बेरियल है. And I
hmm,
got fascinated with that because, conspiracy is what is ultimately conspiracy. Conspiracy is that very delicious question. And that question is two words: what if? What if something were true? What if Jesus did not die on the cross and came to India instead? What if the Mahabharat war was real? And what if Krishna wasn't just a mythological character but a historical character? What
hmm,
if we could combine myth and history and make that into a mystery? So, that is where the starting and ending of conspiracy is. It's delicious. Frankly, though, when I'm seeing this entire situation around me, it
hmm.
seems almost like a narrative that could emerge from a conspiracy fiction writer's stable. And, there was that old proverb which used to say that fact is stranger than fiction. And it's being proved. It's being proved that fact is so much stranger than fiction. We used to think that, एक दिन प्रलय आएगी, कुछ एक दिन ऐसा कोई हादसा हो जाएगा where humanity is finished. If the dinosaurs could be wiped out one fine day, then हम क्या चीज हैं? I mean, I was reading this book called Sapiens by Yuval Noah
Yeah, I've
Harari.
read it. Yeah,
And in
yeah,
that, you must be remembering there was that wonderful metaphor that he used, that think of the age of the Earth, 4.6 billion years, as the age of a human, 46 years. So we equate 4.6 billion to 46. And
yeah,
if you consider this 46-year person, human beings have been there only for the last 4 hours of that
yeah.
46 years. And in 4 hours, we have created such a royal mess. So just think about this. So, to my mind, honestly, what the story that comes to my mind from the current situation is that how can we learn from this situation, and where is there a way? Because I would love to see it as a positive. uh, there's just too much of negative news coming, so it's easy to get pulled down. But maybe the way sometimes your computer malfunctions and you need to press the power button off, and you need to reboot the whole computer in order to make it function normally.
Hmm.
Maybe this is a reboot happening on the earth. This is a
Absolutely. Yeah.
of some sort happening, where we understand what the value of the important people in our lives are, where we realize what the value of earth is, what the value of nature is, what the value of consuming sensibly without causing damage to the earth is, where what should be the limits of scientific discovery, how much should we be doing in our laboratories. So I would love to think of today's story as that reboot story, that mankind emerges from this far wiser, not more intelligent, but wiser.
So your story will begin day after or this day?
No, I would like to think that that wisdom is there within all of us.
Hmm,
It was Albert Einstein who said that, we unfortunately tend to worship the rational mind. But the truth of the matter is that it is the intuitive mind which is far more powerful. And I like to think that the intuition within all of us is very much there. Maybe this is a time. I mean, today, for example, I'm suddenly talking with friends who I haven't spoken to in the last 15 years or 20 years. Because just that need to reach out and to communicate has become so much greater. And let's face it, even once this entire lockdown ends, I don't know whether the world is going to go back to the normal that we consider to be normal. My assumption
Mm,
is that the normal will be different to the normal.
it will be a new normal. It will.
It will
I
be a
don't
new.
know. Yeah,
Correct. So if that,
absolutely.
and maybe that might be better for us. Maybe that new normal might be better for us. So if I had to today take today's current situation and think about it, then of course I would have all the conspiracy characters, probably a character sitting in a laboratory somewhere in China cooking up a virus. In fact, I was rather surprised, Vivek. This latest book of mine, The Vault of Vishnu.
Hmm.
If you don't mind, I want to read two paragraphs from it.
Please, please, see, please.
And of course, this has a villainous character. This particular book has a villainous character, and he is just simply known as the Buzang. The Buzang is
Hmm.
a word which means general in Chinese. In Mandarin,
Okay.
it means general. So he's a very villainous sort of character. And the chapter goes to say the black honky limousine pulled up at the entrance of the hospital in Dengfeng County, Henan. The car had been customized for the Buzang with plush leather upholstery and polished wood trimmings. The Buzang, the secret ward, was a gloomy place. Now he's gone into a hospital. The secret ward was a gloomy place. The walls were painted a dreary grey, and the harsh ceiling lights were the kind you might expect to find inside a prison. The floors were
Hmm.
equally monotonous, long stretches of unimaginative speckled tiles. Nurses and orderlies went about their business, carrying samples, transporting medicines, and handling patients. His eyes swept across the ward. There were rows and rows of steel framed beds containing frail old men wearing striped hospital gowns. The
Wow.
ones who were not lying down were attempting to stroll, their IV drips following them like obedient puppies. A hunchback was trying to get up from his bed, but his spine was bent at an angle that made it difficult. What is the rough age group of these men? Asked the Buzang. The answer 18 to 22.
Hmm.
So, I mean, sometimes when I go back to this particular manuscript and I read it, because half of this story is set in China. And last year, the beginning of last year, ended up spending 6.5 weeks researching in China for this particular
Acha.
story.
Okay.
And I was
Okay.
thinking to myself, I said, Ashwin, you know, people would have today, in case you had planned to do this story 2 years later, there was no way in hell that you would have been able to write this story because you would never have got the research done. But when I'm looking back at these passages and I'm thinking about the sort of work that goes on in laboratories in China and the sort of implications that has, and it's not just China, but in so many other countries where
Hmm.
biotechnology has literally it's gone out of the test tube in some ways.
Yeah.
I think
Actually, yeah.
I think I think what I would love to do is a contrast. You talked about Chanakya's chant, where I contrast the old and the new, the ancient and the present. I think a book which would be very interesting would be that you have these characters, these conspiracy characters, which are the negative forces in the world, and on the other hand, you have the hope for a new civilization. Because to my mind, people think of these as opposites, but I have always maintained that these are not opposites. Light and dark are not opposites. Darkness is simply the absence of light. Heat and cold are not opposites. Cold is simply the absence of heat. In that
True.
sense, and I've believed that even in terms of energy, where I believe that Shiva and Shakti, Shiva, what we call Shiva, is simply the absence of Shakti. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. There is only one form of energy. In that sense, I believe that this could be a wonderful story about how light always wins. Light eventually conquers darkness.
Absolutely. In movies, it's said that the lighting which we do,
Hmm.
so how much light to use, that is always a very critical
Hmm.
parameter. Every DOP and directors have to decide how much your
Hmm.
sets are going to be lit. So it's always said how much lighting to be used. And the answer is how much darkness you want to cut,
Yeah.
because When you enter the set, it's dark, it's black. If you know Guru Dutt the best, many people
Yeah,
know, it's
absolutely.
so dark. And how you use the light in that. It's not important that everything is flooded with light. You don't need so much of wisdom. But whatever wisdom you have, how you use it, how
Correct.
beautifully you use it to create the impact you want to create. And I totally agree with you about the reboot theory. I think what happened was in these 4 hours we spent on this earth, so almost first, if you divide it into part, the first 2 years we were learning how to cope with this bloody earth, how to survive in this earth with other species. And the third year was a year of wisdom, great literatures, all the Vedas and the Bibles and all the religious texts coming, and then scientific discoveries, inventions. Socrates on one side, Galileo on one side, Buddha here, then Chanakya, and Indian scientists like
Of
so many
course.
rishis. And the fourth year, we thought that, oh God, now we know everything. We know how to live here. We know how to grow wheat. Like Harari says that wheat actually screwed the world.
Yes,
With
absolutely.
so so last half year of that, say after 3.5 years, we started believing that we are. See, if you look at all the texts of the third year, if you go by Harari's 4 years we have
Mhm.
spent, it's all about how to sync and synergize with the nature, with the mother nature. Everywhere in the world, if you go, you still have rural festivals, all syncing with the harvesting season. The
That's
cultures are like that. And why do we need so many cultures? Like in Mother Nature, we always say, human beings say, we should protect flora and fauna, the diversity of the nature. But
correct.
we forgot that these mini cultures, these isolated cultures are flora and fauna of humanity, of this Mother Nature. And we started making everything standardized because capitalism has to survive on that, everything uniform. We started making the world the same. We started behaving, speaking, aspiring the same things. Everywhere in the world, people want BMW. There is no
Mm,
even diversity in the choice.
mm,
And we started believing, therefore, that we are the landlords of this earth.
mm, mm.
So now
Whereas
earth has
actually we
forced
were
us.
meant to be the trustees.
Yeah, and as much trustee as animals are, because our
Mhm.
right on resources is exactly proportionately the same as of a frog. So it's
बिल्कुल.
good time to pause, let people understand, and everybody is understanding. Actually, do we need such big festivals? In fact, by this chat, if you see the how people are responding,
Yeah.
we are reaching more people than we reach in live events and all that.
Absolutely. And Vivek, old the old age wisdom, the old age wisdom, you know, I have always sort of had this people coming and asking me, because when I write my Bharat series, there is a mixture of history, mythology, philosophy, spirituality, science, politics, various things come into the mix. Uh, and people ask me that, but how much of it is true? How much of your story is true? Because, I love writing fiction that sounds like fact. And of course, we are
Yeah.
living in a world where even our fact is now beginning to sound like fiction. But
Yeah, if you look at the journalism, definitely.
precisely, I'm glad you used the J word, but that's precisely where it is. So there is a mix between the two. But the mistake that people make is they think that everything in myth is fantasy and everything in history is fact. And this is where I have a huge issue. And
Tell
this
me,
is
I want to know
what
about
I'm in
this now.
some ways trying to sort of rectify it through the medium of popular fiction. Because it was C.S. Lewis who said that a myth is a lie that reveals a truth. So, in other words, a myth is also telling you a truth through the form of a lie. You're meant to dig for the deeper truth.
Yeah,
And on the other hand, my favorite definition of history, of course, is George Santayana, who said that history is a pack of lies about events that never happened, written
never
by
happened.
people who were never there. So,
Yeah,
in that sense, it is a version of events. And when you watch movies like, for example, let's say Tashkent Files, you realize that yes, what you have heard so far is one version out of many versions. So,
yeah,
the the to my mind, where I am excited and where I hope that the world will go is understanding that there isn't quote unquote something known as the gospel truth. uh, I think that is very, very critical. because it will result in a deeper understanding and awareness of where we have come from where, because you can't have an understanding of where you're going if you've not understood where you've come from.
Yeah.
uh, and I think that is something which is exceptionally critical. So take for example, I mean, let's say the epic of Mahabharat. I mean, the Mahabharat started as a work which was known as the Jaya, and it had roughly 25,000 verses. Then,
Mm.
over years and years, centuries perhaps, this evolved into a work which was known as the Bharat, which was double the verses, 50,000 verses. And then that eventually morphed into something called the Mahabharat, which was 100,000 verses. Now, I believe that with every passing generation, and of course, we say that there was one Rishi Vyas, but there wasn't one Rishi Vyas. There were many, many Rishi Vyasas who eventually worked and eventually brought the Mahabharata to its present day form. The same
Mm.
applies with, let's say, the Ramayana. Today we have Ramayana, which is basically the story of Ram, Sita, Lakshman, and Ravan. But the truth of the matter is that there are 300 versions of our Ramayana. And which means, in other words, that this story was so fascinating that 300 different, I mean, if you look at the Valmiki Ramayana and the Tulsi Ramayana itself, there is such a huge
Yeah.
difference between the two.
Yeah.
Valmiki treats Ram as a very ordinary human being,
Character.
when
Yeah.
by the time you go to Tulsi, he has become a Vishnu avatar and he's become God. Uh, if you look at some of the other versions, like let's say, for example, the Adbhut Ramayana, the Anand Ramayana, the Jain Ramayana, the Muslim Ramayana, the Lao Ramayana, these are all Ramayans which have extremely different stories. You take the Adbhut Ramayana, it is Sita who manifests as Durga and eventually does the final killing of Ravan. If you see the Anand Ramayana, the abduction is of Kausalya. If you see the Jain Ramayana, it's Lakshman who kills Ravan. If you see
Mm.
the Muslim Ramayana, Ram is a sultan. If you see the Lao Ramayana, Ram is a bodhisattva. Which means, in other words, we were not concerned with what is the absolute truth. We were concerned about the meaning behind the story. We were
True.
looking for a deeper truth. That is where I hope that mankind, after this event, will look into the deeper truth, the meaning of their existence.
True, yeah. And that's why you see, we have been such a creative generation, especially I'm talking about India, because we visualize everything in terms of metaphors, which means you're very art savvy, literature savvy people.
Absolutely.
See, the,
Absolutely.
co- the like every single deity, if you see Ganesh ho, chahe Durga ho, chahe koi bhi ho, anywhere, it's so fascinating the kind of imagery which has been used, which
Bilkul,
Hollywood is now doing with their VFX,
bilkul,
and with
bilkul.
it, and my theory is that I was reading Patanjali's yoga,
Hmm.
and the way he understood body, and most of the these asanas are very recent addition to yoga. In yoga, they never spoke about asanas;
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
spoke more about the body.
Yeah.
See, the Western science is based on with postmortems of dead bodies, and the
Yes.
entire science of human anatomy in yoga is with the live bodies. They felt their own bodies.
Yes.
So that has been
Yes.
the fundamental difference between Eastern thinking and Western thinking.
Yes.
But the role of stories is so important. But what
Yes.
has happened, I'm just sharing one observation with you. You spoke about Tashkent file. See, Buddha and a traffic jam and Tashkent file both came out of frustration. It
Hmm.
wasn't that I said, oh, this is my truth and I'm telling the world. No. Even I
Hmm.
don't know who actually killed Lal Bahadur Shastri.
Hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And even I don't know behind these forces of these nuisance creating forces in the country, who would like to disrupt
Hmm.
things in terms of the civil life of
Hmm.
people, financial life.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly who funds them, but I
Hmm.
guessed it and I put them together in urban
Hmm.
axles.
Hmm.
The problem with the materialistic world, what happens is, I'm so happy that it's a profession, you sit alone and you write, but when you are chasing numbers, then
Hmm.
everybody starts telling the story which people are familiar with, which people
Yes.
know about, or people want to
Yes.
hear. And this
Yes.
was told to me by one of the biggest film or music producers of India, the biggest music company. I work with them. So the owner of that company was telling me, I said, why do you do so many remixes and why are you recycling old
Ah.
songs? I mean,
Ah.
you are like a 20, 30,000 crore rupee company. You have a monopoly. There is nobody. You destroyed HMVs and everybody. You are the biggest guy. Why don't you give chance to new good lyrics so people understand? Get rid of, I'm not against Urdu, I love Urdu, but get rid of only Khuda and Rab and Janam and Mohabbat and Chapa. You know,
Yeah.
get
Mm.
inspired by Sahir, Majroo, Shailendra, Javed Akhtar, Gulzar. We have had such great list of lyricists. He said, विवेक जी आप जो कह रहे हैं ये मैं भी जानता हूं आपने कोई बड़ी इंटेलेक्चुअल बात नहीं बोली मेरे से कहता
Mm.
बट प्रॉब्लम इज दैट व्हेन पीपल कोई गाना सुना सुना सा होता है सेम नोटेशंस का होता है पीपल
बिल्कुल.
इमीडिएटली स्टार्ट हमिंग इट
Mm.
एंड माय
Mm.
बिजनेस सर्वाइव्स ऑन हमिंग
Mm.
एंड but I said at the cost of music. Today, music has started meaning only Bollywood songs, nothing else. Nobody, when you were growing up, Ashwin, I'm sure you knew at least 8 or 10 ghazal singers,
Of
or
course.
uh,
Of
yeah,
course, classical music was a regular
classical,
feature inside our house.
yeah,
And in fact, to a very great extent, if you recall, I mean, I grew up, I was born in 1969, but जो 1970s or 80s का दौर था, 70s still had great Bollywood music, but 80s had lousy Bollywood music. So
yeah,
in that sense, you were, whether you liked it or not, you had to depend on
yeah,
the ghazal greats and the bhajan greats and the classical greats
yeah,
in order to supplement, and of course, then Western music also. So
yeah.
I think we had a far better rounded exposure.
R.D. Burman, Panchamda. Huh? R.D. Burman is known as somebody who's known for modern rock and all music.
Correct.
90% of Panchamda's music is all ragas. It's in fact in so many. एक लड़की को देखा
बिल्कुल.
पहाड़ी राग कहीं पे यमन. They have everybody use raga. Point I'm trying to make is that is it because of this race for numbers somewhere we also started producing books and famous authors who were just telling stories which people wanted to hear
Wanted to
so
hear.
in this kind of market you started a new thing you started telling Indian stories okay
Yes.
and Indian stories which are so deep rooted in our history or our imagination and the metaphorical world we have
Yes.
created you know
Yes.
so that is a great contribution and not only that I was saying you wrote 13 steps to health wealth luck parenting
Hmm.
and today
Hmm.
I'm saying it was prophetic that you wrote these books today the most people are discussing on social media on WhatsApp on phone calls on video chats is what
Hmm.
health
Hmm.
wealth
Hmm.
parenting and
Hmm.
luck
Hmm.
right so you've written 13 steps so they're very close to life I want to understand what's your vision. If you, I ask you to, what is the, if you have to map a new model for a new world, let's imagine there is going to be a new world. Harari wrote about how it has been thus far.
Hmm.
But if you have to create a new world, what are those 13 things? I know it's going to be, I'm talking, I'm asking you very spontaneously to answer, but you take your time, there's no hurry.
Yeah.
What are those 13 things? Let's build a model
Sure.
so that what I'm planning to do is I'll take this, what you're going to speak in next few minutes. I'm taking from all these thought leaders in next 13, 14 days, as long as this festival goes on. And
Yes.
I'm going to make a nice docket or a short documentary and say these were the 13 great thought leaders from different facets. And this is how they visualize the world, you know.
Uh,
So let's do
Vivek,
that.
you started this part of our conversation. You started it with talking about yoga, and I don't know if you are familiar, but the root of that word yog, is the same as the Proto-European root of the word yoke, yoke. The
Yeah,
root of these words is the same. As we know, we think of yoke basically as using, let's say, a plow or attaching something to something, yoking something to something. It is to latch on. But essentially, what yoga was talking about was to be able to hook yourself, to latch on to the universe, to become one with the universe, to be able to feel that oneness, to be able to understand that you are not an individual and separate entity. In fact, if for those of your viewers who have actually read Keepers of the Kal Chakra, half of Keepers of the Kal Chakra revolves around the fact that what our ancient rishis were telling us in terms of spirituality, is very, very similar to what quantum theorists are telling us today in the world of science. That overlap is tremendous. To my mind, how is this world going to progress from here? Maybe I don't have 13 points to tell you, but
We'll build
I
together, no problems. Yeah,
two,
yeah, yeah.
two ideas.
Yeah.
To my mind, if we are not going to understand that oneness, that I am not a separate individual, I am part of a much wider universe, which consists, uh, uh, I think it was Victor Hugo who said that where the telescope, where the microscope ends, the telescope begins, or where the telescope ends, the microscope begins. We are looking at the same phenomena, whether we are looking inwards or whether we are looking outwards. Uh, all our great rishis who were talking. I mean, there is a hymn in the Rig Ved which talks about the speed of light. And this was done without any instrumentation. It was done purely on the basis of the ability to perceive, the power of perception. You and I are today having this conversation, but you know what? We have this latent capacity to communicate with each other, to communicate with the whole wider universe without necessarily having this conversation. The power of empathy, the power of telepathy, the power of sympathy, those are qualities which are fundamental to human beings, but over the years we've just suppressed them. To my mind, that is going to be the single biggest change that we need to bring about for the future. Our ability to think of ourselves as simply a part of a whole, rather than thinking of ourselves as distinct and separate from what is there. The second change I clearly see happening is that to a very great extent, uh, our priorities in life have to undergo a transformation.
Yeah.
And by that, I'm not simply meaning that, hey, listen, I mean, we will all become sadhu sons. We are going to sit at home. We are not going to pursue what we need to do in order to earn our daily bread. Obviously, we are. But I think to a very great extent, the world has gone through this period of time where it became all about that. And the problem is that if you've seen with a pendulum also, you swing it to one extreme, then it tends to first swing back to the other extreme. And that till the time that it doesn't eventually sort of settle at a point of equilibrium. And I think that what this situation is going to do is force us to come to a little bit of an equilibrium where we realize that there are other things which are equally important in our lives besides simply earning our daily bread. And I think the third big change that is going to happen is in terms of the the way that we will adapt to a new environment around us, and that also not only in terms of technology. Obviously, technology, it may change the way we have to grow our plants. It may change in terms of what our dietary habits are. It may change in terms of how many medicines are we willing to pop, how many antibiotics are we willing to take. So there will be a whole range of changes in terms of that. But I think more importantly, it is also going to change to a very great extent the way that we see our human condition for the future. I am one of those who has always been an eternal optimist. Whenever I'm down, I always figure out ways to pull myself out of being down. When I was being rejected by multiple literary agents and authors, I had a board in front of my desk. And on that board, there were numbers 12, 18, 30, 34, 38. People used to come into my study and ask me, ye number kya hai? I said 12 was the number of times that the first book in the Harry Potter series was rejected. 18 was the number of times that Jonathan Livingston Seagull was rejected. 30 was the number of times that Stephen King's thriller Carrie was rejected. 34 was the number of times that Chicken Soup for the Soul was rejected. And 38 was the number of times that Gone with the Wind was rejected. So I said, when I eventually landed up with a 47 score on my rejection list, I said, wow, I'm going to do very well in life because I'm beating the pants off J.K. Rowling. So, it's a way of how do you psych yourself to be positive? And I think this is what we are going to have to be doing with each each other, psyching ourselves to remain positive in these very, very trying circumstances. So I think we are going to see a rise of sympathy, empathy, and the better side of human nature.
Absolutely. So for people, let me just, I just made points. So four, five things which you pointed: empathy, empathy, and I absolutely agree with it. आप देखिए, जब कृष्ण से बात चली और कहने लगी कि भाई ये अधर्मी लोग थे, तो कृष्ण
Hmm.
said no. I mean, they were playing राजधर्म. There was no अधर्म in that. वो अपना धर्म निभा रहे थे. And in Mahabharata, you see, there was a situation, everybody, सब अपना अपना धर्म निभा रहे थे. Then
Hmm.
what is the difference? When Arjun asked, what is the difference
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
between us and them?
Hmm.
He said the only difference is कि जब वो अपना धर्म निभा रहे थे तो उसमें करुणा नहीं थी.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this wisdom was with us all the times. And that's why, if you see in Indian culture, in lots of cultures, I am not saying only Indian culture,
Hmm.
things, you go to Switzerland, I mean,
Hmm.
even now they worship cows and they have festivals around cows and the grass and all. So we always connected with the nature. But once we got ACs and we got protection, and we said, okay, now I have become so big that I even understand about self-actualization. I even can talk about merging with the God. Who the hell are these other people, other animals in this world? I can do anything. I can modify grass. I can
Exactly.
modify wheat. I can modify.
Exactly.
I can destroy everything with nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
I can do anything. I can destroy countries. So empathy, Ashwin said. Second thing you said, priorities. It is so important. The minute you have empathy, your priorities anyway get set.
Will change. Exactly.
Without empathy, your priorities are never set.
Beautiful.
Then you said adjusting to the universe, syncing synergy. And last thing which you said, I think is very, very important. Why human beings, again coming back to Harari, you spoke about him. He also says that the biggest advantage humans had, that we could adapt, change, and imagine, and we could tell stories. He also
Yes.
talks a lot about story. In fact, he says most of your life is gossip, nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So adapting, I think we forgot that we need to adapt, and we became very intolerant. Okay, there is no AC. Oh shit, I can't sit here. And I don't travel in less than business. I don't travel in non-AC trains. बच्चे भी देखिए, where is my favorite cereal, where is my favorite this thing.
बिल्कुल.
We became so intolerant with our bodies. So nature has tuned us, nature has helped us. I won't say nature is against us. Nature is helping us, like a mother sometimes helps. It's taking us in a certain direction.
You know, Vivek, this I you brought up this very interesting point about our our in some ways alienation from God. I I had this extremely enlightening discussion with one more great storyteller, which is the none other than Dan Brown.
Hmm.
About 2 or 3 years ago, he was in Bombay, and the publisher of Dan Brown said that he's going to be delivering a talk at NCPA. So rather than him delivering a talk, Ashwin, why don't you be in conversation with him, so that the Indian Dan Brown can have a conversation with the real Dan Brown. So,
Yeah.
okay. So we did that conversation, which lasted for about 45 minutes at the NCPA. But after the conversation, he asked Ashwin, "What are you doing for dinner?" And so we walked across the street to the Oberoi, and we were sitting there from about 9 o'clock till about 2 in the morning. So about roughly 4 or 5 hours we were sitting. And after a few drinks, he asked me, he said, "What is your definition of God?"
Hmm.
And so I had a paper napkin in front of me, and I wrote on that. I said, G is equal to infinity minus K. And I gave it to him.
Infinity
K,
minus.
K for king. G
Yeah.
minus G is equal to infinity minus K. So he looked at it and he said, "Now you'll have to explain this to me." I said, G is what we consider to be God, what is divine.
Hmm.
Infinity is the पूरा ब्रह्मांड, जो पूरा यूनिवर्स है, वो
Hmm.
infinity.
Hmm.
And K is the extent of human knowledge. What do
Hmm.
we as human beings know?
Hmm.
What we don't know, what we don't understand, we attribute to God. The Egyptians saw the sun rise in the east, they saw it set in the west. They said, "This is the sun god Ra. He travels across the skies in his chariot." When it's night, he gets tired, he goes to sleep, then darkness happens, so the night happens. Then later on, Galileo and Copernicus and everyone came along and they said, no, no, the sun is a giant ball of fire and the planets revolve around it. And suddenly Ra lost his divine status. So essentially, because we could explain it, now it was no longer divine. Now, the eternal question we have always asked ourselves is that did God create man or did man create God? कोई ऐसे लोग हैं जो शिवलिंग को देखते हैं, वो कहते हैं ये पत्थर है, और कोई आदमी ऐसा है जो पत्थर को देखता है और कहता है कि ये शिवलिंग है. Who is right? We don't know who is right. But the greatness of our civilization, our civilizational ethos, was that it doesn't matter who is right. Everyone can have a perspective, and all of those perspectives form the whole. And I think that is something which over the years, unfortunately, we have lost out on. The great thing that we had with Brahmanical thought in some ways, dharmic thought, as against, let's say, Abrahamic thought, was the fact that there is no right path, as it were. Will you consider a slap being delivered by a stranger on the road the same as a slap being delivered to a child because he's about to set himself on fire? And so the mother slaps him. The two acts are the same, but the context of those two acts is very different, and that makes all the difference. I think that वो जो जिसे कहते हैं nuance has disappeared from our discussions these days, and I am hoping that will come back.
Brilliant. I mean, this had to come from a wonderful storyteller like you, nuance. And if you look at it, the real romance is also in nuance.
Bilkul.
Everything lies there, ultimately what is in between. And too much of black and white, too much of binary, too much of dependence on the power of technology is also what we started doing. See, I always say, what is the role of a storyteller? I said the role of a storyteller is to destroy old gods and create new gods. And that is your fundamental duty. In today's time, if I say it in a public function, people will say, hey, come on, you can't say that. But and so somebody said, why are you saying that? I said, if you won't do that as story writers, then all these technocrats will started creating gods. And they did. They created artificial intelligence and algorithm. The algorithm became the god that started making choices for us. It started telling us what's right and wrong. And it brought all the stories of the world. Sri Aurobindo always said that we have fallen so much in the pit of this thing that from here we can only go up. So they brought it down to so much of uniformity that if you see all the teenagers all across the world aspire the same thing, they listen to the same thing, they read the same thing. Harry Potter. I mean, I wonder why in India the largest selling book amongst teenagers should be Harry Potter and not the Vishnu or any other book,
Yes.
for that matter.
Yes.
Indian stories in whichever language they want to read.
Yeah.
But when big powers come in, the first thing they do is destroy individual choices. We blame politicians all the time. But let me tell you, the corporates are also not free of this guilt. They also destroy individual choice. And they say, yes, Coca-Cola gives you, whatever.
For the longest time, Coca-Cola was marketed as a health tonic during the first 50 years of it. It was a health tonic. So, I mean, but I agree with you, Vivek. I mean, I can't remember who was the writer or storyteller who said that the two greatest powers of a storyteller are to make familiar things new and to make new things sound familiar. So, in that sense, I think for a bit, my approach always has been that, listen, can we take some of our age-old wisdom? We have so much of it. We have oodles of it as far as India goes. I mean, just the spiritual wealth of this country is so much. And the great thing about our country has always been that it has been far more focused on philosophy rather than specifically just about right and wrong in terms of religion. I have always maintained that philosophy is about questions that can never be answered, whereas religion is about answers that can never be questioned. So our country has always been about philosophy more than religion. And I think this is the time for us to become far more philosophical in our outlook. We should be treating this as an opportunity to evolve. in the way that it's a message from a greater power telling us that, hey, listen, that equation you were talking about, G equal to infinity minus K, you may think that K is human knowledge, but any equation which has infinity on one side will be by very nature indeterminate, mathematically indeterminate, which means, in other words, that God is indeterminate.
Beautiful, wonderful said. I think after this, nothing is left to be said. So, but before that, एक दिनेश चौहान साहब हैं. He's like asked you so many questions. I mean, I can't. So many people are repeating. I mean, they are asking lots of questions. But just to sum it up, he's saying that he loves stories, but not very fond of reading, because in the digital age, their mind is not trained to read too much, and which is a fact. People have the minds have got trained, because everything is very fleeting in this modern world, so you can't concentrate in more than 2 3 lines. He's saying, do you know, can you suggest something so that people can develop the habit of reading?
Vivek, for my approach has, of course, I am one of those far more, I would say, liberal minded authors who believes that we are not authors, we are storytellers. And ultimately, whether you tell a story in English and then it is translated into 10 languages, or whether it's available as a paperback or a hardback or an ebook, or whether it's on an audiobook, or whether it is as a movie or a video game or a Netflix series, they are all forms of storytelling. So I have never been sort of that particular ki nahi kitab hi padho. But today, for those who are not necessarily great readers, I'm finding increasingly a large number of my reader audience is coming back to me and saying, I heard your book. Audiobooks have now become quite a thing, actually. The other thing that I'm finding also is that there is such a, even if you aren't really a person who feels that you can get through a typical Ashwin Sanghi novel is 120,000 to 150,000 words. But on the other hand, there is far more simplistic reading, which can be in the form of, like, for example, novels, which run into about roughly 70, 75,000 words. And so, you can start with smaller bites. Maybe you could start with short stories. Like, for example, I mean, the original short stories of Satyajit Ray, I mean, the Feluda stories, for example. I mean, those are incredible even today, after, I don't know, 40, 50 odd years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you can start with small bite sizes, and then automatically, once that wo jo ek baar aadat pad jati hai, then you'll find that you will not be able to get out of that aadat very easily.
Superb. See, Kulbhushan Rana is saying, Ashwin ji, it feels like Mr. Sanghi should never stop speaking and should go on and on. But one thing I want to say, Ashwin, I'll tell you what, we have met in many festivals, literary festivals here and there. But generally, what happens? आप अपना बोलते हैं, निकल जाते हैं. मैं अपना बोलता हूँ, निकल जाते हैं, because we have flights to catch and all that. We don't get chance to do that. And when you know each other, you also think, अरे हाँ यार, इनका तो कभी भी मिलके बात कर लेंगे. So you generally what today? मुझे भी बोलने का शौक है. But today I was just listening to you and I realized that how much I was missing these deep, meaningful conversations. I was so used to all my life till the time I was like pre-digital age. We used to sit with friends and such deep, meaningful conversations for hours, then continue next time. So a lot of people are saying, sir, so somebody is writing, see, we do this school of creativity. This is under school of creativity. And this also, we just put up it during this time. Maybe I have a very young team, very young, struggling team. We are not moneyed kids, but we do lots of things.
विवेक,
So
आप
we
तो
put up
खुद ही जवान है यार. अभी आपका टीम तो जवान हो गई. यू आर सो यंग.
मैं आपसे एक आध साल बड़ा हूं, तो चिंता मत करिए. So we put up this school of creativity. The idea was that मुझे एक बार किसी ने, एक बुजुर्ग है मिस्टर मनमोहन वैद्य, मैंने उनसे बोला था कि can I use a piece from your article? He said, knowledge, according to Indian thought, knowledge has no copyright. Your work of fiction can be, but the knowledge, the wisdom has no copyright. And more you share it, more it grows. More it grows, better the society becomes. So with
बिल्कुल.
that thought in mind, I said, we are sitting here free, everybody has time. So why don't we share knowledge and let me teach story writing, this and that. And वो करते करते इतना successful हो गया, तो we gave it a name, School of Creativity.
How
So
lovely.
a lot of people are saying they, in fact, more than 10 or 12 people are writing that please continue for another hour or two. I won't do it because the software doesn't allow me to go on and on and on. So हम बड़े कंजूसी से काम कर रहे हैं. But I promise everybody, I will speak to Ashwin later on, and if he's willing, he can come as a do a master class once the things become better. I
Sure.
will get nice cameras, make a nice black background, create this thing, and then he can speak for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours in School of Creativity. And
Well,
Ashwin, I think it
yes,
is very important. We have limited everything into half an hour classes, 1 hour classes.
बिल्कुल.
You're kind of person. I mean, I want to talk to you so much about these 13 steps of health and parenting, especially. And I want to speak to you about the Bharat series and that. I think it would be a nice idea if you come to School of Creativity. How we do it, we'll structure it. But I want to present to you to Indian young boys and girls where you just speak with unlimited time. Do you think it's a good
I would
idea?
I would love to do it, Vivek. I मेरी आपसे मुलाकात ज्यादा होती नहीं है, सिर्फ लिट फेस्ट में होती है. हम लोगों का ऐसा कॉन्वर्सेशन होता नहीं है. तो आज जिसे कहते हैं बड़े चैन से हम लोगों ने बातचीत की है. एंड आई वुड लव टू बी एबल टू कैरी दिस ऑन. एंड यस, आई थिंक I can't remember who it was who said that the shortest distance between two people is a story. So the world is not made up of atoms and molecules, it is made up of stories. So let's do a session entirely on how to tell a good story.
Great. And all those people who are writing one-liners of Ashwin, you have to promise me that yes, there is no copyright on wisdom, but when you quote them after this on Twitter, give him the credit. People should know where the thought has come from. The shortest distance is the story, undoubtedly, and stories can heal people like no medicine in this world. So keep telling great stories and keep shining, Ashwin. I really love you a lot, and
No,
please,
Vivek,
please.
it has been it has been my honor, it has been my privilege, it has been my blessing to be able to have this conversation with you. We've talked about so many meaningful things, and I wish you. In fact, by the way, before we sign off, I have to ask you one thing: that when my wife knew that I was going to be in conversation with you today, and probably she's watching it also, maybe she's online watching it, but uh, uh, I wanted to ask you, because she asked me to ask you, that when is the Kashmir files finally going to arrive? Because you have several fans in this family in terms of the Tashkent files. So we are waiting for the Kashmir files.
First, give my regards to Anu and to your lovely wife. We were leaving on the 17th morning to shoot the film
Okay. Okay.
on the of March. But on
Okay.
15th evening, we got to know, it was a Sunday. We got to know that there are Section 144 in few districts of Kashmir.
Okay.
Uh, and the Home Ministry told us that not to venture out because they are ready with imposing Section 144 all over the country. But then the lockdown happened and the curfew happened. So
Sure.
we had to stop it. But
Hmm.
we keep reading the scripts with all the actors and
Hmm.
Anupam and me, Pallavi, and everybody comes together. We do that. We are doing song rehearsals on that. So I very strongly believe, and which is a lot of people say, why do you tweet so much? Why do you are always active doing so many things? I believe that show must go on.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is when the show goes on, a lot of people join it, and that's how we'll go on. So we are doing work. Please tell her we are at it, and it's a very, very special film. I told you in the bus that it's 2 3 years of lot of sacrifice by a lot of people. We have put it
Hmm.
together. It's a very difficult film to make,
Hmm.
but yes, we will present another story.
Hmm.
It's just another story. I'm not saying this is the story. It's another story.
No,
Since there are lots of stories, this is also one story. So please try
absolutely.
know. And this time, I'll call you if we do a trial or a premiere. I'll call you
Please
definitely,
do.
both of you.
Please do. I look
And,
forward to being there.
and give my regards to your old father. Look after him. And I want to appeal to everybody. Please look after elder people, because nothing, I believe that without their blessings, nothing happened. Like Ashwin said, without luck, I call it blessing. He calls it luck. But without that, nothing happens. So thanks a lot, Ashwin.
Thank
Okay.
you, Vivek.
And we'll meet again when the world is stronger, better, and has empathy and priorities right. So,
Thank you.
namaste. No shake hands here. Just
Namaste. Namaste. Jai Hind.
okay. So, friends, Ashwin is signing off, but let me just tell you, this is this Future of Life festival. As you can see, I have written Anupam Kher's name there. Today, I'll write Ashwin's name, and I'll fill it with great thought leaders and great ideas. And in the end, we'll present all these ideas together for you. If you have any idea and question, if you want to understand, learn anything, please let us know. We have Amish Tripathi coming, one of the great authors. Then we have Malini Awasthi Padma Shri, authority on a classical singer, authority on folk art, folk singing. Then we have Gautam Chintamani coming, and we are talking about films and the news stories and the life. And he will talk about Rajesh Khanna, Amitabh Bachchan, Dharmendra, all your favorite stars. And then we have Abdut Gupta and Swapnil, some great musicians and music directors, singers from Maharashtra, which Pallavi ji will be talking to them. Then we are going to have Suresh Watkar ji, and again Pallavi will be talking to them. And hopefully we will have some of the finest singers next week, and some great people who you love very much. We'll also have a discussion on spirituality. We'll do on yoga. We'll do on lots of other things. If you have any choice, you want to listen to somebody, please write to me, and please follow I Am Buddha YouTube channel, because we are doing it for you. We just are sharing these knowledge, these ideas and thoughts in a relaxed environment with you. You also think about future of life. You are also a thought leader with your own experiences. Share with us, and School of Creativity will take it forward. I'll make sure if it comes on my Twitter handle or to our email ID, which all the addresses you will find soon, I will share them, we'll discuss that. But together, we can discover our creative consciousness, which will help us create a very bright and happier future for our lives and our children's lives and our parents' lives. So, thank you very much. Jai Hind. Dhanyavad.